Now this video is going to discuss the physiology of the male reproductive system. Before we do so, we need to know the different parts. So we'll start off at the testis, and this is where spermatogenesis happens. And then these sperms will go through the epididymis, which is found on the posterior aspect of the testis, and this is where the sperms mature. And then when they're ready to leave the body, they would have to travel through that vas deferens. And you can see how the vas deferens goes above or superior to the urinary bladder, and then it curves posteriorly and is found now posterior to the bladder. Then all of those sperms will be dumped into the ejaculatory duct that passes through the prostate gland. In this part, the sperms are going to start gathering some of the secretions from the glands like the seminal vesicles and the prostate. And you can also see this very tiny gland known as the bulbourethral gland. Know that the seminal vesicles and the bulbourethral glands are bilateral, so there's one on either side, while the prostate gland is only one. And then what is now semen, it will pass through the urethra to the outside of the body. The urethra is obviously a common pathway for both semen and urine. Now for the summary of spermatogenesis, we all know that the process begins at puberty, and we already went over this at the beginning of the chapter, but a couple of things that we want to emphasize here. That the whole process starts with these spermatogonia. Spermatogonia are these primordial gonadal cells. Spermatogonia are going to make sperms, okay? And these have to start dividing by mitosis. So we have not started the meiotic division yet. Mitosis, we're making tons of these spermatogonia, and differentiation. So they grow up a little bit to become a primary spermatocyte. Primary spermatocytes still have 46 chromosomes with 2 chromatids. And again, when we say these chromatids, we mean that this chromosome is X-shaped. The primary spermatocyte goes through the first meiotic division to become a secondary spermatocyte with 23 chromosomes, still 2 chromatids each. In order to split these 2 chromatids, the cell would have to go through a second meiotic division to make spermatids. Spermatids now are haploid, so they have 23 chromosomes with 1 chromatid each, but they are immature sperms, so they would have to mature a process we called Spermiogenesis, and in order to differentiate into a mature spermatozoa. And again, your spermatozoa has 23 chromosomes with 1 chromatid each. Now this is what a human mature sperm looks like. So there is a head, a midpiece, and a tail or a flagellum. The head is the part that has the nucleus. That's where the genetic material is, and it is covered with an acrosome, kind of like a cap covering that has all of the enzymes that will help during the process of fertilization. The midpiece has lots of mitochondria in order to help with the swimming process, and motility is provided by the flagellum. The hormonal control of the male reproductive function, you will find that it is very close to, if not even identical to, the hormonal control of female reproductive function. There are obviously differences, but the hormones are pretty much the same. So it all starts with the hypothalamus secreting gonadotropin-releasing hormone. That hormone will reach the anterior pituitary through the hypothalamo-pituitary portal vessels that will stimulate the anterior pituitary to secrete FSH, or follicle-stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone. Again, these are the exact same hormones that are found in females. Some textbooks have them under different names, but they are the exact same hormone. FSH, through the circulation, will reach the testis and stimulate Sertoli cells to start the whole process of spermatogenesis. Sertoli cells do not themselves mature into sperms, but Sertoli cells produce paracrine hormones and they're pretty much supportive of the primary and secondary spermatocytes and so on. So Sertoli cells themselves do not become sperms, but they are supportive cells to the whole process. Okay, so Sertoli cells are going to eventually make paracrine hormones to stimulate spermatogenesis. Sertoli cells also make another hormone known as inhibin, and inhibin, by negative feedback, is going to inhibit the anterior pituitary to stop making FSH only. It really has no effect on LH. Well, let's see what's going on with the LH coming out of the anterior pituitary. That is going to circulate and reach the testis, stimulating Leydig cells to make testosterone. Testosterone will further activate Sertoli cells to produce their function, and also testosterone will stimulate and maintain the male sexual characteristics. By negative feedback, testosterone will inhibit the anterior pituitary to stop making LH, again, very limited effect on FSH, and it will also, through negative feedback, inhibit the hypothalamus from making gonadotropin-releasing hormone. So we'll take the functions of Sertoli cells and then the function of testosterone. So the function of Sertoli cells, as we said, these are really supportive cells. It has a function in the fetus where it secretes the anti-Mullerian hormone, and that again is going to lead to the regression of the Mullerian duct. Okay, anti-Mullerian hormone used to be known as the Mullerian inhibiting substance, but now we know that it's actually a hormone, so we named it the anti-Mullerian hormone. The function of Sertoli cells in adults, remember, Sertoli is all about support. Okay, so it provides a barrier between the spermatogonia and all of the cells, between them and any chemicals that are found in the plasma. Okay, it also helps in engulfing through phagocytosis, engulfing any defective sperm. It also nourishes the developing sperms. And we already talked about some of the hormones that it produces. So Sertoli cells in the cells are, they do respond to FSH, so they're stimulated by FSH. They're also stimulated by testosterone made by the Leydig cells. And then Sertoli cells are going to produce their own paracrine hormones in order to stimulate the process of spermatogenesis. Sertoli cells secrete inhibin, which by negative feedback will inhibit the anterior pituitary from making too much FSH. It secretes paracrine agents that influence the function of Leydig cells, and Leydig cells are the cells that produce testosterone. Okay. Leydig cells are also stimulated by LH to produce testosterone. So let's see what are the effects of testosterone in males. Well, by negative feedback, we know that it inhibits both the hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary from making their hormones, namely gonadotropin-releasing hormone and luteinizing hormone. It also acts on its neighboring Sertoli cell to stimulate spermatogenesis. It leads to the differentiation and maintenance of the male secondary reproductive organs and the male secondary sexual characteristics, which are the characteristics that are seen on the outside. So it's important that it helps in the differentiation of them and maintenance. And that's why these levels need to be high throughout, they're not cyclical, but they need to be high throughout adulthood. Testosterone stimulates protein anabolism. It also helps in stimulation of the ossification of the growth plates, so the epiphyseal plates in bones, and it will eventually lead to the cessation of bone growth. So during puberty, there is this growth spurt that happens, followed by the stopping of growth. Testosterone is required for sex drive. It may, high levels may actually enhance aggressive behavior. So there is research that shows that some of the very aggressive criminals it might be actually due to the higher than normal levels of testosterone. Testosterone also stimulates the kidneys to produce erythropoietin. And if you guys remember, erythropoietin hormone is the hormone that stimulates the process of erythropoiesis, which is the formation of RBCs by the red bone marrow. And that is why in males, males have higher red blood cell counts because of this action, because of the action of testosterone in stimulating the kidneys to produce erythropoietin. Now, what are the other effects of testosterone in males? Well, some tissues, testosterone cannot produce an effect until it changes into something else. So, for example, we'll give a couple of examples here. In the male brain, testosterone would have to be converted through aromatase enzyme into estrogen. And estrogen will be the active form in the brain cells. So testosterone really does not have a direct action on brain cells unless it is converted by that enzyme aromatase. In the prostate, testosterone would have to change into the more potent kind known as dihydrotestosterone or DHT. And the enzyme that does that is known as 5-alpha reductase enzyme. Well, DHT, although it is needed, but it can do two things. It can worsen male pattern baldness, and in the cases of prostate cancer, it also stimulates these prostate cancerous cells. So a way to treat male pattern baldness would be to give these people an enzyme or a drug that inhibits the 5-alpha reductase enzyme. So you could be treated with inhibitors of 5-alpha reductase. Same thing with prostate cancer cells. So these are cancerous cells that respond to high levels of DHT. Well, why don't we just give them a drug that inhibits 5-alpha reductase, and that would inhibit or lessen at least the levels of DHT. Now for puberty in males, and when we talk about puberty in females, it is pretty much the same thing, where it's all about the hypothalamus turning on. The hypothalamus is going to start releasing gonadotropin-releasing hormones, and that is going to stimulate the whole process of puberty. In males, this usually happens between the ages of 12 and 16. Now the reflex pathway for an erection, and the whole process begins through one of either two ways or both. So we've got input from the penis through the stimulation of the mechanoreceptors, or different thoughts, different sensory inputs, such as different sights or smells that are going to stimulate the autonomic nervous system. So there will be descending CNS pathways that are triggered by these things. Okay, the neurons in the penis are going to, first off, you're going to inhibit the sympathetic neurons. And that will lead to there's also the stimulation of neurons that release nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a gas. So these neurons release a gas neurotransmitter. Nitric oxide is a vasodilator. So that would lead to the dilation of the arteries in the penis. And because of that dilation, more blood comes in, which also compresses the veins. Remember, the veins have a thin wall compared to arteries. And that is actually going to lead to an erection. Ejaculation is a reflex. It is a spinal reflex, which means that the center of this reflex is found in the spine. And that is why if there is an injury in the spine, that could lead to loss of ejaculation. Ejaculation is made out of two different phases. First off, there's emission. And emission pretty much means that the sperms have to be transported from the testis throughout the whole system in order to be ejaculated out of the body. Okay, and then the second part is the actual ejaculation. So I'm going to go back to the image that we started off with. So emission would be due to the contraction of the smooth muscles in the epididymis, the vas deferens, pushing the sperms throughout the course and gathering the secretions from the seminal vesicles, the prostate, and the bulbourethral glands. Now, the second part of ejaculation is the actual contractions of the smooth muscles of the urethra and the skeletal muscles of the floor of the penis that will eject the semen out of the body. So semen is really the sperms plus all of the secretions gathered from those glands. So you have the sperms plus the secretions from the seminal vesicles, prostate, and bulbourethral glands. And important to know that a vasectomy does not affect spermatogenesis. Okay, remember, spermatogenesis happens in the testis. A vasectomy would be an incision of the vas deferens. So it really has no effect on the process of spermatogenesis. It has no effect on an erection or ejaculation. What it does do, though, is that semen will be ejaculated without the sperm. So no sperms are going to be in that semen. You'll basically just have the secretions from the 3 glands. The sperms are trapped in the vas deferens and in the epididymis, and they eventually die off and just absorbed into the body. What is the use of anabolic steroids in male athletes? Well, although anabolic steroids do actually increase muscle mass and athletic performance, but on the downside, it inhibits the testis from producing testosterone. Okay, so it decreases endogenous testosterone, which eventually means that the testis is going to shrink. So there is a decrease in testicular size, and it can eventually lead to a low sperm count. And that concludes the male system.